Welcome to Porchlight, a presentation of Porchlight VNA and home care, providing top-rate, highly personalized care to individuals and families in the Berkshires and also in the hill towns of Hampden and Hampshire counties, all in the comfort of your own home. And it always was Lee Regional VNA, now of course Porchlight, so very much associated with the town of Lee. Another organization that has been associated with the town for a very long time is what was once called the Village at Laurel Lake and now is Kindred Laurel Lake. And I'm very happy to welcome to the program two very important people from that organization, Brian Rosano, who is the Executive Director for Kindred Laurel Lake, and Corey Salvini, who is the Director of Marketing for the assisted living side for the organization. So both of you, welcome to the program. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us on.
So now, Brian, you're new to the campus, and I want to introduce you to not only the Lee community, but of course all Berkshire County, who watches this show and beyond. So you've been in the long-term care world for a little while, and now, but this is your first venture out into the Berkshires.
It is, and again, thank you for having us on today. Yes, I've been in long-term care, post-acute networking, and senior care for over 20 years. Majority of my career has been spent east of here in the greater Springfield, Hampden County area, working with companies such as Genesis and HealthBridge. I am here today for, I think, my third month, starting my third month, and I'm very excited to be here. So again, looking forward to my experience with Laurel Lake as well as Berkshire County.
Yeah, and looking at this, of course, it's a whole campus. So you have that long-term care side, what people would know as a nursing home, but then there's also the assisted living component. We'll talk more about that with Corey in a little bit. So you're actually heading up that whole campus, which has got to be an interesting dichotomy. You have these two different businesses.
Correct. What we would call the continuum of care on the campus is unique in the fact that we do have assisted living amenity, social model care in the assisted living, coupled with the skill sets and 24-hour nursing care of our nursing home and SNF side of the operation. It's unique in the fact that Laurel Lake currently has 88 skilled beds, along with a specialty Huntington's Chorea program, along with subacute rehabilitation and long-term care services. But what makes us unique is the fact that we also have 74 assisted living units under the same roof. You'll find many healthcare organizations have that continuum of care on a campus setting, but it's not necessarily under the same roof like it is up at Laurel Lake. Mm-hmm. We literally can go from one side of our building to the next and have the same caregivers, have the same skill sets, and in 1 second be, I guess for all intents and purposes, in a very clinical model, and then in the next be in a very social model where residents and their families are engaged in community type of events and community living. So it's two separate models under one roof, which I think is a very unique opportunity for our building, our campus.
It is, and Corey, so how important is that to be able to explain that to people who are considering assisted living? There are family members who may have a loved one who is about in that point where they may need a little extra help, and they're considering different options. To be able to have that extra clinical component right next door.
Well, we have the ability, as Brian said, for the assisted living for people to actually move through the continuum. Mm-hmm. So we've had residents that have gone to the skilled nursing facility side for short-term rehabilitation, and upon discharge have realized that they're not ready to return home. So they will transition to the traditional assisted living. We also have the unique ability to care for residents or family members that are requiring 2 different levels of care. We've had couples, a lot of couples, that one maybe, and we have one right now actually, that the husband is next door and he's the primary caregiver for his wife. So he's next door going through his rehabilitation following a stroke, and his wife, who he was the primary caregiver for, and she has a little bit of mild dementia and short-term memory loss, so she's actually in our assisted living. The 2 of them can remain together. They eat their meals together, and none of the kids or family members actually have to drive her to visit him while he's undergoing his rehab. And for his recovery, knowing that his wife is safe next door and can see her whenever he wants is huge. We've also had brothers and sisters, and we've had sisters, mothers and daughters. So we have the ability for people requiring 2 different levels of care, and the ability for them to float throughout the continuum, whether they're on the traditional assisted living and then they come down with a pneumonia or something that they will be hospitalized for, and then go for a little short-term stay in the nursing home and still maintain that continuity of care from their primary caregivers.
And looking at that, also this idea of respite, because a lot of times you have these scenarios where you suggested you have one spouse who is a caregiver for another spouse, and often there are challenges health-wise for both of those spouses. So the idea of respite is something I know that you like to focus on also.
We like to, there's a lot of different programs for our respite program. We have the traditional respite program where a family member can have their loved one come into the facility where we care for them, where they may have something else that they need to go to or just a break. But we also have the ability to actually care for people for a short-term basis and transition. We've had people that are on the short-term rehab that will come in for a month, see how well they do in the assisted living while somebody is right outside and can check on them quite frequently, and then return home. As well as the traditional respite where they're actually giving the caregiver a break. We've had, recently we rolled out this short-term transition program that's different from the skilled nursing side on the assisted living, where we have the ability to actually admit people for a weekend or 2. We recently had a woman that didn't qualify for going to a skilled nursing facility where it was covered by Medicare, but yet she had undergone surgery and wasn't ready to return home. She was still of working age. She was only 62 years old, and all her friends were still working. She had nobody that could actually care for her, and she didn't have a spouse. So she came in for a short-term stay for medication management, making sure somebody was checking on her and bringing her her meals. She wasn't able to utilize all the amenities that assisted living has to offer with the dining experience.
Sure.
But we had room service delivered to her, and she was taken care of where she would normally have not been able to.
And what you suggested is a whole other realm of thing, the offering additional services, the dining and that sort of thing, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But it's interesting because you said, some things being covered, and that's the complicated thing in our healthcare system, of course, is, when you have these services, how do we pay for those services? Are they covered? And that's something you are at the forefront all the time. And of course, Brian, you have to be aware of as well. So there is a difference between both of these, and it depends on certain qualifications and what the clinical report says and what is appropriate. And so that's basically one of the things you have to focus on. Brian, in the long-term care world, Medicare has always been pretty significant especially for short-term rehab people. Things have shifted, though. There are some things that people ought to be aware of, I'm sure.
Absolutely. One of the biggest misconceptions is that nursing home care is paid for 100% by Medicare for as long as a person needs it. And that, unfortunately, is not the case. While a majority of your folks do come through the doors for short-term rehab, do have Medicare coverage, it's based upon a person's need for skilled services. Skilled services, as an example, include physical, occupational, and speech therapy, or IV medication treatments, skilled wound care, recovery on a number of different types of elective surgeries. Those things constitute what a skilled service is, and as long as a person requires those services, Medicare will pay for them for up to 20 days at 100%. After that, days 21 through 100, there is a copay, which most people have a supplemental insurance, a Blue Cross or Blue Shield, or a Health New England benefit, something along those lines that will pick up those services while they stay with us.
And that's for the short term. Now, for the long term, traditionally, in a lot of cases, Medicaid has been one of those payer sources, but that's also, of course, challenging too.
It
always is.
It is. As with any social programming, funds are limited and qualifications are fairly stringent. Medicaid services do, however, if a person qualifies, cover nursing home care on a long-term care basis. The typical screening process is very quick. However, the application process can be burdensome, and that's where local attorneys or elder care advocates or community-based services from the senior centers, things along those lines, can help people find the right mechanism to apply and eventually become granted for Medicaid coverage. Once a person is in the nursing home or the long-term care side of our building, we certainly have the resources and the expertise to help people and sort of walk them through the daunting process, which could be a hindrance for most people. So it does become a concern. However, with the expertise and the folks and the resources you have at a Laurel Lake, it is a little bit less troublesome of a process.
And so tell me, how the difference between, and I think, looking at, there's two sides of things. The long-term care, is one side, and then the short-term. Sometimes people are making decisions, especially if it's an elective surgery, they're making a decision before they even have a surgery. So that's one approach. But on the assisted living side, it's a whole another realm. I would assume, Corey, is that perhaps more research is being done by the families. I don't know if it's a longer-term process.
Typically, it can take a little bit longer. As far as the mission for assisted living, we have two aspects. Well, obviously, the majority of our residents are private pay. We do have a program called Group Adult Foster Care, which is a mass health program. There's limited spots for those. So they have the assisted living is paid for by private or mass health. For the screening process, when somebody comes in for the admission process, we'll usually meet with the families and tour them. Hopefully they've done their due diligence and have looked online and have got a little bit of background, but we're willing to walk the families through that whole course. Then we'll look at them to make sure financially they're able to afford the assisted living, as well as make sure clinically our director of nursing will meet with the family and the resident to make sure that it's an appropriate fit and that we put them in the right program. We have two different programs at our assisted living. We have traditional assisted living, and then we have what we call enhanced assisted living, which is significantly more care than what they get in traditional assisted living. So we want to make sure that it's a smooth transition for these residents that are coming from their home or even from next door from our skilled nursing side, that it's a smooth transition and we place them appropriately in that program.
Right, because every patient or resident, depending on if it's assisted living, it's a resident. Sometimes we call we have that whole labeling, but every individual is going to be different. And you talk about a continuum. There's not one simple type of assisted living resident, and there's not one long-term care resident. There's this whole spectrum. And I think that's where also Porchlight comes into play. Because some residents who may live in assisted living would have some home care services, that's because they need that extra support. So there's a lot of that, and essentially every individual is different.
And that's what we do. When they transition from a skilled nursing facility or home, we usually will ask a VNA service to come in to help transition them. It is a completely different model. We are a social model. We're not a clinical model in assisted living like they are on the skilled nursing side. So we will ask the skilled services to come in and help these residents transition, so it's a safe transition for them.
That's fantastic. And of course, you're right near the lake. That's why you're called Laurel Lake. And it's always that location that people drive by all the time. And I think, over the years, and Corey, how long have you worked at?
14 years.
So 14 years. So is that since, I remember.
I was
a little bit after
later,
the building
yes.
was actually built,
Few months.
and for years, it's a great reputation. So tell me about the culture at Laurel Lake and what it's like working there.
Well, I think working there for 14 years speaks phenomenally for the company itself. I wouldn't work there for 14 years if they weren't a good employer. So, the culture, I've seen a lot of different changes in healthcare itself, but it's been a great transition.
And of course now Kindred, Laurel Lake, Brian, your counterpart in Great Barrington, Bill Kittler, was on the program, and we were giving him the business a little bit. Wait, it's Kindred, Great Barrington. Make sure you get it right. It used to be Great Barrington Rehab and so forth. But part of that is the rebranding, and I think part of it is also recognizing that there is a benefit to having a sort of system. So when different buildings and these businesses are able to count on each other for different resources, and that could mean everything from teaming up for a road race like we did the summer for the Grade 8 road race, or what have you. There's certainly a benefit to being able to work together with different Kindred buildings.
Oh, absolutely. We all have our sets of expertise, if you will, and all that does is present opportunities for us to share and make the experience for those folks in Great Barrington a little bit better, excuse me, as well as those folks at Laurel Lake. When we can help each other out just on a local level, we all win. However, when you team that with a company the size and of the resources that a Kindred brings to the table, it just makes the experience even better. We have resources from our home offices in Louisville, Kentucky, as well as our regional leadership in Andover, Massachusetts, that can help us through situations where we may not have the answer. We have experts from a clinical perspective, from a property maintenance perspective, an environmental perspective, and so the list goes on. And we can draw upon those resources to help in situations where people have very unique circumstances. So that brings a lot to the table. And
yeah, I was going to
fine.
suggest that it's really, and you hear this quite a bit, but it really is never too early to be informed about this.
Never.
Whether you have a loved one who may be approaching that time when maybe you need a little bit of extra help, and I'm sure you're willing to show people, even if it's early in the process, to show them around the facility.
Because we see it all the time. Families come in a crisis situation, and they're worried about where their family member is going to go. And if they know in advance what the facility's like, they can bypass that whole crisis situation and know where to go.
Reduce the stress.
Absolutely.
Reduce the stress.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And when you have expertise like we have here, then that's very helpful. So, Corey Salvini, a great pleasure having you on the program.
Thank you,
and Brian Rosano, welcome to the Berkshires, 3 months today.
Thank you.
I know you're going to love it. Lots of good hunting out here. So the two of you, best of luck, and we'll certainly be seeing you in the future at Kindred Laurel Lake. So thank you very much.
thanks, Kindred.
Thank you.
And this has been Porchlight, a presentation of Porchlight VNA and Home Care. I'm John Kroll. Thanks for watching.